Hello, and welcome to the My Heart and Mind podcast, where it's all about creating the feel-good mindset so you can make the most of every moment and reap the benefits of getting the most happiness out of life. And now, over to your host, Sally Crawley.
Welcome to episode 17 of the My Heart and Mind podcast. Today is the second episode with my cardiac specialists, and I'm interviewing Ashley Reaver. Ashley specialises in helping people with high cholesterol live a long and healthy life without feeling powerless to control their numbers because of their family history. Hear about what cholesterol is, what is good and what is bad about it. Ashley explains in terms that make total sense. She uses the metaphor of cops and robbers, which I thought was rather amusing. We talk about some of the misconceptions and myths about your cholesterol, about the diets that reduce or increase cholesterol, and her thoughts around diet and medication, in particular statins. You'll learn how you can make your diet interesting, what you can eat, and that thing called moderation, how to keep motivated and what to do if you fall off the wagon. We also have a conversation about exercise and how it impacts on managing and reducing your cholesterol levels too. Not having enough time is not enough of a reason not to exercise. She tells me all about smoking and how it causes an increase in cholesterol. I literally had no clue until after my heart attack. And Ashley will give us 3 quick wins that you can take away and use today. And she'll tell you all about her free online cholesterol class. Hello and welcome to Ashley Reaver. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about your life in general?
Sure. So, hi, everybody. I am Ashley Reaver. As Sally mentioned, I'm a registered dietitian in Oakland, California. And I really focus in my private practice on helping individuals lower their cholesterol levels. So really in educating about what cholesterol is, why it matters, why you should care. And then also what impacts cholesterol levels so that people can help to lower those levels and reduce their risk of developing heart disease.
Excellent. So can you tell me why you specifically focus on cholesterol?
So I myself have a family history of high cholesterol. There's a lot of members of my family that have elevated cholesterol levels. And I can remember going to one of my first doctor's appointments as an adult where they drew blood work. I had on all of my forms. I have family history of high cholesterol, and my levels came back normal. And my doctor said to me, "Well, you clearly didn't inherit the gene for elevated cholesterol levels." And in speaking to my other family members about it, neither had they. And that really started just in reframing how I wanted to educate a lot of people about elevated cholesterol levels. For many people, it is something that you have a strong family history of. Many people in the same family have high levels of cholesterol. And a common misconception there is that there's a genetic component. And something that is so important is that really that I try and convey a lot is that you inherit so much more than just your genes from your family. You also inherit your favorite foods, the foods that are included in your diet every day, maybe how you move your body, other types of lifestyle habits. And it's those other lifestyle habits that actually have the biggest impact on our cholesterol levels. The amount of people that have genetically inherited high cholesterol, familial hypercholesterolemia, is incredibly small. 95% of people with high cholesterol did not inherit genes that caused them to have high cholesterol. But maybe what they did inherit from their family is an eating pattern that also resulted in high cholesterol for other members of the same family.
Yeah, I eat very much this way that I was taught by my parents, and my daughter does the same, so I can completely understand that. So is cholesterol good for us, or is it bad for us, or is it a bit of both?
So we absolutely need cholesterol. This is something I love to explain, is that humans require cholesterol, and that is why we produce it. Cholesterol has a lot of key roles in the body. Probably first and foremost is that it is part of every single cell membrane. So what protects every single cell in the body. We also make our sex hormones, our stress hormones, vitamin D from cholesterol. And then we also use it in a digestive compound called bile. So because humans need it, that's why we have a pathway specifically set up in our body to produce cholesterol. So regardless of what you eat or don't eat, your body still has this mechanism to make cholesterol. The secrets to kind of helping to manage cholesterol are having not too much of some things that can result in more cholesterol being produced and kind of lasting a little bit longer. And then also including some nutrients in your diet that can basically, you can think about it as helping your body use more cholesterol.
So
but we absolutely need it.
Yeah. They talk about two different types, HDL and LDL. What's the difference between them?
So LDL is often what's called that quote unquote bad cholesterol. And it's not necessarily bad, like a blanket statement, but it's the type of cholesterol that if it's too high for too long, and there's also some source of inflammation that could be diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, smoking, then it basically triggers that LDL to become a bit more dangerous. So too much, too high LDL, as well as one of those factors that really can cause a lot of inflammation, makes that LDL, it's called oxidized, but you can think about it as almost like radioactive. It becomes something that can cause damage. And that's what can start to lead to those buildups in your arteries. So basically, your body sees that dangerous type of LDL as something that it needs to deal with. So your body mounts an immune response, and your white blood cells essentially eat it. After eating a few of them, those white blood cells die, but they're stuck to your arteries. So then another white blood cell comes, eats some more, gets stuck on top of that. And that's what those plaques really are. It's just white blood cells kind of accumulating in the lining of your arteries. HDL, on the other hand, is quote unquote good cholesterol. And HDL's role in the body is essentially to try and pick up cholesterol that's out in your system and take it back to your liver. So the easiest way that I like to explain them is kind of thinking about them as cops and robbers. So you can think about LDL as robbers out on the mean streets of your blood vessels, and HDL as cops. If you have more of these robbers out in your system, ideally, you're also going to have more of these cops, your HDL, out there kind of patrolling the streets to try and pick it up and take it back to the liver. You can think about your liver as jail, where hopefully that cholesterol is rehabilitated into some sort of productive member of your body. But if you have elevated LDL, you also want to make sure that your HDL is on the higher side, because that's going to be somewhat protective. Definitely, though, at a certain point, HDL no longer can be really protective. And that's something that we're seeing a lot recently with, at least in the US, keto is like a humongous craze. I don't know if it's like that in the UK at the moment. But that's causing people to have very high LDL and very high HDL. So the thought there naturally is that HDL is very protective against that high LDL. And that's true for normal levels. But after a certain point, having very high LDL and also very high HDL, that relationship no longer exists, which is interesting, and only something that really is coming out in the research maybe in the past 3 or 4 years, as this is, something that is just so popular at the moment.
I know so many people talk to me about the keto diet and how it's protective of the heart and it helps with cancer.
It is not.
No, I know. It's one of those urban myths, isn't it, that's out there?
But a dangerous urban myth that can lead to bad things in relatively short periods of time.
Okay. Talking about myths, what are some of the myths that people link to cholesterol and diet and things like that?
I would say probably the biggest myth that I hear, at least when I'm trying to convince people that they can control their cholesterol, is just that family history piece, that it's genetic, that there's nothing that they can do about it. Their mom, their dad, their grandmother, they're all on medications for it. So, kind of throwing up the hands and thinking that there's nothing that you can do. And again, that's really what my effort is to communicate to people, is that there is so much more that you can do. And for the vast majority of people, that family history has to do with your lifestyle habits, not to do with your genes.
Yeah, I think people use it a bit as I'm a victim of
course,
the family, and I don't need
right.
to do anything because it's out of my control. But obviously, you feel differently. So,
And for some people, if you want to take medication, I am not against statins in any way. Thank goodness that medicine exists. Especially for those individuals that do have familial hypercholesterolemia, where it doesn't matter what they do, that machinery in their body to produce cholesterol just cranks it out, and there's no feedback for it to stop. And their body it has a more difficult time basically taking it out of circulation. So that drug is super, super important for that. Is also helpful for people that, they just can't, for whatever reason, lower their cholesterol through diet and lifestyle changes. I am not pro statin if you just think that there's nothing you can do and don't want to investigate any type of lifestyle changes to help you with that. Certainly with all medications, there's going to be some sort of side effects that are there.
I'm one of those people, so I don't actually take a statin, I take something else, but it doesn't work as effectively. So I do have to think about my diet more. So it's one of the reasons why I wanted you on this show. Educate me.
Yeah. And I think it's just, at least in the United States, when you go to the doctor's office, it's not even a conversation. Oh, you have high cholesterol, I'm calling you in a prescription. Mm-hmm. There is no discussion of, let's talk about your diet. How active are you? Let's refer you to a registered dietitian that can help you lower that. It's just an automatic, like, here's a drug. If the doctor is willing to give a little bit of wiggle room, the only recommendations that are ever given are weight loss. And that's another big kind of misconception that I hear a lot, is that the only way to lower your cholesterol is to lose weight, which is not true at all. In fact, the types of diets that many people do to lose weight result in elevated cholesterol levels. Oh. So let's say keto diet. Yeah. You're completely removing fiber from your diet. And I'm sure we'll get to that. When you remove carbohydrates, you remove fiber. In particular, this special type of fiber that's really impactful for your cholesterol. And you're drastically increasing your fat intake, in particular saturated fat, which you usually get from animal products. You can also find it in chocolate and in coconut oil in very high amounts too. So those two nutrients are really key. And for a keto diet, for example, you're driving down the one that you really want, and you're drastically increasing the one that you should be avoiding. And there's doctors in the United States that recommend someone go on the keto diet to lose weight, which might result in weight loss, but also results in horrible cholesterol levels that just further increases the risk of someone developing heart disease. But
constipation and bad breath and
exactly. I don't know why anyone would sign up to be constipated.
Me neither.
But even other less extreme weight loss things, the recommendation is in the world in general, but also coming from physicians, is to reduce your carbohydrates. And I'll leave it at reduce carbohydrates from physicians. But if you go out in the media, then you also see increase your protein. Yeah. Typically, again, with that reduction in carbohydrates, you have a reduction in fiber. Increasing protein typically results in more people eating more amounts of animal proteins, which give you more of that saturated fat. Mm. And there is a loose connection. I will say there definitely is a connection between weight gain and elevated levels of cholesterol. Basically, the same compound that can be made into a form of energy that our cells can use is also the compound that can be made into cholesterol. So if you have an excess amount of energy, you also have an excess amount of this compound that your body can produce cholesterol from. If you have a lower amount of that energy, or let's say you have lower energy, you're some sort of a calorie deficit, then you're going to have less amount of that compound for your body to produce cholesterol. Mm-hmm. But that you also can do that without trying to cut out all of your carbohydrates and drastically increasing your intake of saturated fats.
Yeah. In the UK, the cardiac teams recommend the Mediterranean diet. Is that something that you would recommend and is good for you? Because they've
Yep.
got a nice amount of pasta going on there. They've got the fish and the olive oil and all the rest of it. And actually,
Yep.
it's a diet that I used to live by. I have to put my hands up. I was a smoker and I didn't understand the connection between smoking and cholesterol. And therefore, I thought I was healthy and I wouldn't have a heart attack. But then I learned afterwards, and you've already mentioned it, that, it is quite drastic. So diet, lifestyle seems to be one of the big impacts. Does exercise build into this as managing cholesterol?
Yep, absolutely. Exercise, I get asked all the time, what's the best supplement to take to lower your cholesterol? And it's exercise, which is not what people want to hear.
No.
But if I could put exercise into a pill, it would be the most successful drug ever. But exercise is so important just for cholesterol related reasons. Again, if you think about that compound that your body can use as energy or it can make cholesterol from, if you're exercising, you're going to need more of that compound to go towards energy production. And that can be just from walking. Another thing that's super important for exercise, kind of in that same equation, is strength training builds your muscle mass. If you have more lean muscle mass, your body requires more energy to maintain it. Okay. So not just focusing on being like on the elliptical or your spin bike, but also really doing some strength training to build muscle is a great way to help to shift your body to require more energy without you, just constantly sweating, basically.
Yeah.
So those are important parts for cholesterol. For heart health in general, exercise there's just so many benefits of it. The human body is so cool when you think about what exercise does, is it physically increases the size and the strength of your heart. Your heart becomes more efficient at pumping blood through your body. So that's why you often see a decrease in your heart rate. And that's just because, your heart kind of becomes Hulk, and what it can move with one pump becomes much stronger. I just kind of love thinking of that visual as just something that's so great about exercise. And exercise does not need to be like 90 minutes of you sweating and then laying on the floor exhausted. It can literally be 30 minutes of walking once a day and finding time for strength training, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, 3 times a week. That's a great place to start. And I think a lot of people are hesitant to start exercising when they think that they have to go to a gym and do all sorts of intense stuff, when it can be, you watching TV, doing some squats or lunging to the refrigerator to get a snack. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that's super, super structured. It can be dancing, it can be hiking. Swimming is a great form of activity, even if it's just stretching on the floor. That's still something that's better than nothing.
Yeah. And the way you talk about it is the little bits that all add up into the one big picture, isn't it? So
exactly. And it's the ones. Exactly. And it's what you can maintain. It's great if you can sign up for a 30-day boot camp challenge. Awesome. But any benefit that your body has gained in that 30-day boot camp challenge is going to stop once that 30-day boot camp challenge has stopped if you don't continue exercising. So instead of trying to go just wild up front, like 100% to the extreme, instead, start to build in very slow things that you're going to be able to maintain long term, because that's what's going to have an impact. The fact that you did a 30-day boot camp 4 months ago does not have an impact whatsoever.
Yeah, and it's something you're going to have to do for life, isn't it? To keep your body and your heart healthy.
So you should like it. Yeah. So figure out a type of activity that you enjoy doing.
Yeah,
and they are out there.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I really like martial arts. That was my thing when I was younger, because it wasn't just an exercise. You were learning something. You were competing against your body. You were competing against others. You were learning another language. It was all encompassing. I'm not going to be doing that now, but dancing is another form of exercise that I actually did for pleasure. But to do it now is actually exercising me. So yeah, I really like that.
And it's just being creative and thinking outside the box of like what you think exercise is.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to do that. And a lot of times it is people's ego that holds them back from counting a 15-minute walk as activity.
Oh, right. And how do you mean, what
It's
do you mean by it?
meaning that, I can't get in a workout today, so I'm not going to do anything. I can't go to the gym for 60 minutes, so I'm just going to sit on the couch. When in reality, okay, you don't have 60 minutes, but you probably do have 10 to 15. What can you do in those 10 to 15 minutes that might not be your 60-minute sweat in the gym, but are still very beneficial for your heart health?
Yeah. Again, it goes back to that jigsaw, the little pieces building up to the bigger picture. So can
Yep.
I ask you some questions now? I've canvassed a few people and I've got some kind of questions to ask you. So I'm going to ask them one at a time.
Sure.
And just I don't expect you to go into lots of detail, but just a quick answer so that we can kind of educate the world as we speak to them. So I'm sure you've heard this time and time again, diets are boring. How can I make it interesting?
Yep. The first thing that I would always recommend is don't approach it as a diet, because that's going to restrict the amount of foods that you feel comfortable eating. When you don't have variety, you're going to get bored. And when you're bored, you're going to stop doing whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, same thing with activity. Instead of trying to go 100% to the extreme, start doing a few things each week, implementing just maybe 2 or 3 things a week. And then the next week, if they went well, can you either add more? So let's say if you're eating beans or you're trying to eat more grains, make it a goal to maybe once a day have either some type of a high fiber whole grain or a bean. If that went okay, next week, can I try and find a second opportunity in my day to put that in? If it is, trying not to eat as many sweets, instead of just completely cutting those out and that lasting for 2 weeks, and then you go to a birthday party and all of your favorite sweets are there and you really go overboard into them, can you just try and cut back, let's maybe half the amount of, I'd call them cookies, you'll call them biscuits, I think now.
Yeah, you're right.
So instead of having 3 each night, could you try and get by with 2 each night? And then the next week, can you cut down to 1 each night? And then the next week, can you try and have maybe a cup of mint tea in place of a few of those nighttime biscuits that you might have? That is a much more sustainable way to try and make changes to your diet. It doesn't, and I should say too, for lowering your cholesterol, it does not require you to cut out anything. But it does require you to be mindful about how much of certain nutrients you're including in your diet. So if you, in the US, there's something disgusting that they sell at carnivals, a fried stick of butter.
Ugh.
Is that something that you should eat? No. If you have a bite of it because it's a weird, gross thing that you found at a carnival, okay. But that, and I think that that's like an extreme, thinking, is that nothing is really off limits, but you do want to make sure, you want to be aware of what is in that food and then how that food kind of fits with the other things that you're eating. So let's say fried chicken is something big in the United States. Fried chicken has the skin and it's fried. So it's going to have a lot of that saturated fat in it. Fried chicken every week, probably not the best. But if you have fried chicken once a month and it's like a special occasion, okay. That isn't going to be that big of a deal. But it's that kind of mentality that a lot of people have of these things are strictly off limits. I cannot eat them. That just closes in kind of the available options. Instead, I really encourage people to go at trying to think about what they should be adding to their diets. Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking about, I need to eat more grains, I need to eat more beans, maybe I'm going to eat tofu, edamame, those types of things. I want to add in more servings of vegetables. If your focus is on those things, you're eventually going to run out of stomach space, and you're just not going to have enough space or time to be able to fill in those foods that don't serve your cholesterol as well.
Oh, excellent. It sounds to me that it's all about moderation. And I'm a believer of moderation, even in moderation. So you can have your fried chicken.
And moderation isn't sexy. It doesn't sell books. It doesn't help you drop, 14 pounds in 3 days or whatever all of these before and after pictures are. But that's how you don't get burnt out. Now, if you want a small slice of something because you're at a family gathering, have it. because you're doing the right things 80% of the time. So, that fun 20%, you don't need to restrict all of those fun things, because, if you go to a family birthday party and you're not allowed to eat any cake, that stings. You're not going to enjoy yourself. People are going to ask you why you're not eating cake. They're probably, if it's my family, they're going to like eat their cake right in front of my face to show me that they can eat cake and I'm not eating cake. Which doesn't, it doesn't make me feel good. And I'm not going to want to stick kind of in that oppressive mindset of I can't have things that I'd really like.
It's that deprived feeling, isn't it? That makes people actually fall off the wagon of eating well, because they feel deprived and therefore they want to reward themselves and make themselves feel.
Exactly. Yeah. And that reward themselves part, typically, we always want the things that we tell ourselves we can't have. So if you tell yourself you can't have chocolate, then the one time that you let in to like allow yourself to have chocolate, you're going to eat so much more chocolate than if you had just let yourself have some chocolate throughout the week. How many people really eat 1 or 2 whole chocolate bars in one sitting? Not that much. But if this is the one time that you're going to let yourself have a chocolate bar after you haven't had chocolate all week, you're going to eat the entire chocolate bar.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's building in these patterns that make it so that you don't reach that deprivation point that then makes you really rebound and go overboard in those types of foods.
Uh-huh. So one of the other things I found that people do ask, or it's not really that they ask, but they say when they're thinking about diets, is that when they are changing their diet, they constantly think about food and they don't realize how often that they are thinking about food. Do you find that a lot? And what would your advice be to help with that?
Yeah, I think it probably goes towards what they're thinking about are all the foods that they can't have. So instead, again, of putting that blanket of I need to cut all of these things out, if you're planning out your week, where can you put some of those favorite foods in? So, let's say, I don't even know, fish and chips, for example. Yeah. Can you plan fish and chips for dinner on Thursday night? Because then when you're going to have that, as opposed to I can't have it, I can't have it, I can't have it. And then every single restaurant or stall that you walk by is obviously selling fish and chips. And this thing that you've told yourself you can't have is now in your face a lot. Whereas if it's something that's on your menu a few days from now, it doesn't have importance anymore. It is not something that you're going to fixate over.
Yeah. You can look forward to it, can't you?
Exactly. And I think another thing that's really important is having that education piece of exactly what certain foods are doing in your body and why it's important to put them in there. Because if you don't know that piece, let's say beans, for example, beans are a really excellent source of fiber. They also give you a lot of protein, but they give you that protein without the saturated fat that you would get if you got protein from animals. So, thinking in your mind that these 2 nutrients that you're working really hard kind of to move in the right direction, this one food can help you do that. The next time that you're trying to plan your menu or you're making dinner and, you don't want to put beans on it, you're going to be much more likely to put those beans there if you can remember that this is a food that's really, really going to help me, as opposed to so-and-so told me to eat beans and I'm sick of eating beans. So that kind of education piece is also really important. Like I want all of my clients to know exactly why I'm recommending them make certain diet changes. I don't want them to take my word for it. I want to walk them through the process of what all of these things are doing in their body, because that's what's going to stick. And that's what's going to help to kind of unwind a lot of reasons why people do or don't eat certain foods regularly.
I think also when people are introducing new foods that they haven't had before, they tend to take it in its most basic form. So again, there's this education in what can you do with beans that isn't just a tin of beans chucked on a salad or something like that.
Right, that sounds gross.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And I think that's what puts people off, because I was brought up by my mum to always have meat and 2 veg. So if you get rid of your protein in the meat, well, what do? It's not the same. Beans and 2 veg. So yeah. It's about actually taking ownership of it as well. And
I think that's a great point, because if you go into like hate eating, where like I hate beans, but I have to put them on my plate, you're going to put a lot less effort into it and you're not going to like it. Whereas if you're viewing it from, this is a new food that I'm going to try and incorporate a lot more, let's go find ways, like let's find some recipes that would make it seem a lot more enjoyable. Or the same thing, like I need to change my eating habits a little bit. And maybe, the standard plate that you grew up eating, it doesn't really work with this new style of eating.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also being willing to learn new things. And that's also been something that I bump up against a lot. It's just individuals thinking that they cannot learn new things. This is how we've always done it. This is how I was raised. And that's great. That's fine. But that doesn't mean that you can't incorporate some new things or learn how to prepare foods in a different style.
Yeah. It's about being curious, isn't it? Seeing
exactly.
how far you can get and what can you learn. So
exactly.
So another thing that I think confuses people is, how do they know what they should and shouldn't be eating? Is there any lists anywhere that says this is good, this is bad, and this is okay-ish, but not too much?
Probably, but I would say if you're eating by those lists, that it's going to give you a do not eat list and an eat a lot of list. And that do not eat list is something that I really don't recommend, because those things that would be on do not eat list, ice cream, butter, any type of red meat, that could be lamb, beef. In the US, we have bison. Skin on any type of meat, like chocolate, anything would be on there. And no one's going to sign up for that. Yeah. Instead, what I'd really love people to do is be aware of the nutrients in some of these foods. And then that kind of being a running tally that happens in the back of their mind. So saturated fat is something that all of those foods are very high in. And when thinking about how much saturated fat you have over the course of the day, I like to recommend, like, each day, maybe there is one item that's kind of a high saturated fat food. But if that's in there, then that's it for the day, kind of. That's the choice that you've made. And instead of like thinking really rigid that, this is a low saturated fat food and I can only have 3 of these each day, like making it by meal period, expanding that a little bit, and instead thinking about it as all of the meals that you'll eat in the day, or even taking it one step back and thinking about it as kind of a moving 7-day average. Because maybe you do have prime rib or, a roast beef or something like that one day. And maybe that is higher in saturated fat, but what can you do the next day to help bring that down? Your body doesn't work on a 24-hour schedule. So it's really just knowing how to be flexible with these foods that are higher in some nutrients that you should try and limit. But how do you still fit them in and not feel guilty about it? Because that overall, you're probably still doing fine.
Yeah, I really like that, what you were saying, because I'd heard that before about weight loss, about how do naturally slim people stay slim. And it's not that they deprive themselves all the time. It's just that they've kind of got this monitoring of, they can have a blowout and then they adjust over a period of time, and then they can have another blowout, eating a whole bowl of ice, a whole pot of ice cream if it's me. I like chocolate. And so we punish ourselves literally. If we've had one bad meal, we think, okay, that's it, we've blown it, we've ruined it.
Yep, exactly. That thinking is I would say that thinking for weight loss, but also definitely applies to your cholesterol, is why people don't stick with those diets. One meal has not ruined a day, a weekend, a week, a month. It is just one meal. Yeah. How awesome. Then 3 to 4 hours, you have a completely new chance to do something else. And I think that often that's what people are struggling with, is they've either, had a bowl of ice cream and then, F it, everything's ruined. Now I'm really going to go deep and also go for mac and cheese and chicken tenders and fish and chips and whatever. And now you've created a much bigger hole that's going to be harder to kind of dig yourself out of than just enjoying one bowl of ice cream. Another thing that happens is then you go into super restriction mode. If I had a bowl of ice cream, so tomorrow I'm only going to have 4 pieces of celery. And when you're starving yourself, the next thing that you're going to do is go back to that bowl of ice cream, which then takes you back to 4 pieces of celery. And it's just a vicious cycle. So instead, it's, again, not trying to be extreme, knowing that one meal is one meal. That's a great thing about eating and your diet. You always have another opportunity to get it right. You can't get it wrong. So it's having also just a lot more like grace with yourself and knowing that while you're trying to change your diet, you're not going to be perfect. That goes back to being curious. It's okay that learning something new is difficult. You're not a failure because you're learning.
Yeah. When I learned to walk as a baby, I kept falling down and I just had to keep practicing.
And you didn't give up. And look at you now.
Yeah, I've got a broken leg.
Although you have a boot
on. So listening to you, it feels really liberating, because it doesn't sound like it's a diet, it's a lifestyle change, which you hear a lot in the media, etc. Is there anything else that particularly makes your diet, the way you manage your clients, different from what you can get in the media and things like that?
I think it's just a difference of being nicer to yourself. Like, I think what you get in the media is that you're this way because you didn't do this or you did do this. And that, again, if you do this, you failed, basically. And that's not what it is. I think it's just a bit, food is something that is so emotional for the majority of people. I would say 75% of people care about what they eat. Like, they're making food decisions based on emotion. And, maybe it's tied to certain things that from their past, from how they were raised. Maybe it's tied to certain values that they have. The other 25% of people, they don't care. Put whatever in front of them, it's just fuel. Mm-hmm. But for most people, again, that 75% of people, they fall into that category where that food means more than just fuel for them. And I think a lot of diets cater to that 25% of you're not allowed to feel anything about food other than fuel, which is why most of them don't work for people. For some people, they're successful on it if they don't care. So it's, again, I think a lot of it is just reframing how you approach feeding yourself in a nice way, because all this information that we're constantly being fed is that this is bad, you did something wrong, you're a failure, which is not the case at all. And I would say in particular for women, constantly feeling as if you need to be on some sort of a diet has led a lot of women to have elevated cholesterol levels. And that's because they have constantly been removing carbohydrates and trying to have more animal protein to fit into the whatever. So a lot of what I also teach is that you have to remove or release that goal of weight loss. Might still happen, but your primary goal right now is your cholesterol, because that's what's having an impact on your health. Yeah. You wanting to lose 4 pounds has no impact on your health whatsoever. So remove your vanity goals and focus on the goals that are actually going to have an impact on your health as well as your family in the years to come.
That's amazing. And I think that is holistic, the way that you're looking at it, which I think is really, really important. And I like that 75-25%, because I'd really want to be like that 25%. But I don't think we were meant to be like that, because if we go back in time, food was, we needed food to survive, and we needed to get good hormone releases in our brains when we ate to let us know that we were doing good and that we wanted to go out and hunt and forage and all the rest of it. So I think it's a bit of it comes from a long way back when we were, cave people perhaps. But so it's absolutely fascinating listening to you. Have you got some tips that you could actually give to our listeners today that they could actually apply after listening to us and make differences?
Yeah. So I would say in my program, one thing I've tried to simulate as much as possible the experience of working with someone one-on-one. So basically what we would do is I'd ask you to write down everything that you eat for a week as you're going through kind of our first phase of the course. And then you tally up, basically, I have some categories to look at. You tally up how much of certain foods you're eating and the things that you are the farthest on the left of, I'll say. So maybe farthest away from where we'd want you to be. Those are the 2 things that I'd want people to focus on first. So a good example there, animal protein is a really, really big one. And animal protein in particular, I'm talking about meat. I don't include fish or shellfish in that. So chicken, beef, pork, lamb, anything else that I'm missing that's often included in that. Ideally, you're going to want to shift that to maybe down to once a day. And for a lot of people, that is a humongous shift. For a lot of people, meat is in breakfast, lunch, and dinner, even sometimes snack.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great first place to start, is how can you be creative in using other types of protein from plants to fill your protein needs throughout the day. That shift is a humongous one. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I'd recommend is eating breakfast and eating at regular intervals. And it's funny that those things inherently don't have an impact on cholesterol. What they do have an impact on, though, is you not being absolutely ravenous, getting home, diving face first into your cabinet, eating all of the chips and cookies that you can find, and then not being hungry for dinner or not being hungry for lunch. And those types of convenience foods, which are fine to have, but they typically are much higher in that saturated fat. So avoiding yourself getting to that place where you're hungry and you just need anything. It's normal for your body at that point to reach for crackers and chips and cookies, because those are immediate fuel sources. They're sweet, they're salty, and they're fatty. And those are things that our body has been hardwired to know will give us immediate energy. So not letting yourself get to that point is incredibly important. And the third one that I would say is just trying to incorporate more fiber, as much fiber as you can eat from foods. And that includes fiber from from vegetables, as well as fiber from grains and beans.
Right.
Beans, for some reason in the United States, have been like demonized through all sorts of things lately. I don't know anything less scary than a bean. Farting in your sleep is not that big of a deal.
Because you're asleep and you don't notice.
Right. So, just trying to be mindful of incorporating more of those types of things. That's, it sounds easy if you just think about it as 3 tips, but those are things that you're going to do 3 to 6 times every single day. That's a lot to remember, 21 to 45 times a week, whatever that number ends up being. That's a lot of things to focus on. So, that also then leads into not feeling bad when something doesn't go as planned. Yeah. 45 things is a lot of stuff to remember. If I had a to-do list that was 45 things long, I wouldn't get it done.
No.
So it's important to prioritize, to also know you're not going to get through all of it. And that doesn't mean you failed. That doesn't mean, you tear that to-do list off and throw it in the trash. It just means that next week, you're going to have the same 45. Can you develop any strategies that help you get through more of them?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. And they are so simple and so logical as well. It makes total sense. So you mentioned your program. How could people start working with you if they were interested to?
Sure. So I don't know if there's show notes or anything that you'll share with this.
Yes, yeah. Whatever you tell us, I will make sure is in writing in the show notes so people can
awesome.
Etc.
So I have a free class that I've made that kind of walks people through the 3 biggest mistakes that I often see when people start trying to work on their cholesterol levels. The family history piece is in there. Starting and stopping numerous diets is in there. And then it also gives some information about the course and why I made the course to go through the process of educating people about their cholesterol, how to change it differently than what you would get if you're just listening to the media, if you're Googling something, and if you're listening to your physician. So all of that is in this free class. And that's really the best way to get to know me a little bit better, as well as to learn about the course. I'm on Instagram, if anyone is on Instagram, at lower.cholesterol.nutrition. And there's some information there. It doesn't go as in depth as the course. But in addition, with the course, we have a free Facebook group for just our members. And then we have live monthly calls that are actually, I think, 6 or 8 p.m. your time. So it's totally doable. It's not in the middle of the night. And then past that, if someone would like to work together one-on-one, I only offer that for course members. And that's because in my private practice, I just found myself repeating so much of the information that's not taught. So if you go through the course and you still have questions, I am available to work one-on-one, but I want to make sure that you have that solid foundation. And I made the course, again, really to simulate everything that I was going through with one-on-one clients, which includes just so much information that you don't get when you go to the doctor and they tell you you have high cholesterol. It includes what cholesterol is, why it matters, the things that can make it more important, or make you really need to focus on it a little bit more too.
That's excellent. So it sounds like you're going to take people on a journey from getting to know you through to working with you very remotely, and then a little bit of interaction. And if they want to take it further, they've already got the basis. So time spent with you makes a huge difference. That's fabulous.
Right. And another thing I love about the course is you can pause, rewind, re-listen as much as you want. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to do that at all of your doctor's appointments?
Oh, yes, definitely. If I could record them.
Yeah. And it's self-paced. So again, I want people to go through and extract the most information that they can from the course, and also implement it in a way that's sustainable. I've had people, go through the course in 3 weeks, and then they go back through it, really just binge it basically like it's a Netflix show, and then go back through it really slowly and pick out the things that they need to do to build a plan. And the goal of it is that you go through once and you build a plan, but that plan is something that's always going to evolve as you feel more comfortable taking the next step. It's not come in and do exactly this. It is great. Let's look at what you're doing now, identify the opportunities that are going to have the biggest payoff. Yeah. And then slowly continue to build on those changes that you've made, so that your cholesterol levels come down, and they stay down for good because we've made these changes in a sustainable way that you can do forever. If you do an extreme diet, again, for 30 days, your cholesterol might come down, but once you stop doing that diet, you're also not going to have those results anymore. And that's a big change in mindset of getting away from this like strict diet mentality that you can't stick with. I say in the course, and I say to all my clients, if you can't do something for the rest of your life, don't start it. Let's find something else that you can do, because that's going to have a much larger impact.
A very wise woman you are. Very, very wise. Well, I'm going to wrap up now, but is there anything else that you'd like to share with everybody, or have I kind of picked your brains completely now?
One thing that I think might be interesting to talk about is just the smoking piece, really what smoking does. So cholesterol is kind of something that, again, we all have, and it's something that's lingering under the surface or in our blood vessels. It's not inherently bad. If there's too much of that cholesterol and you have one of these things that causes inflammation, that's when that cholesterol fuse kind of is lighted, or is lit, so to speak. So smoking causes a lot of inflammation just because that's coming into your lungs. It's causing some damage in your lungs. But that inflammation doesn't stay there. So that inflammation that's caused in your lungs, basically it recruits a lot of things in your body to try and fix it. And those things also then leave your body. So that's one of the reasons why smoking is typically associated with a higher incidence of heart disease, is just because that inflammation is that fuse. Mm-hmm. Is it the fuse that lights the match or whatever? That makes that yes, exactly. That makes that LDL more dangerous. The same thing is true if you have high blood pressure, if you have diabetes, if you are, have a lot of excess body weight. Those are all some things that cause that inflammation that make that LDL a lot more, turn it into something that's supposed to be there to something that's pretty dangerous.
Yeah. I had no clue, as I said earlier, that smoking had that inflammatory effect on your body. I knew what it did about the lung cancer and all the rest of it, but they don't seem to cover it so much in the media about that. Actually, that is part of the connection. So thank you very much for sharing that. Ashely, it has been absolutely brilliant listening to you and talking to you today. Thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sally.
You've been listening to Sally Crawley and the My Heart and Mind podcast, a show for you if you've had a heart attack, cardiac event, or other life-changing experience and want to feel good. It's all about mastering your feelings and emotions so you can feel great and live the life you love. To find out more, visit www.myheartandmind.co.uk and note that that's an AND and not the ampersand character. Go be magnificent.